Losing to newly promoted Hull City is definitely not the way you want to start off your Premier League campaign.
Positive drops, McBurney's there, it doesn't go in, now it does! Drifts it in, and the header's lost in! Welcome to Hull City!
Manchester United have just gone to also newly promoted Hull City and lost by 2 goals.
It was the first time that Hull City had won a game against Manchester United in Premier League history. While it was a one-off game, the match did expose many problems that Carrick will have to deal with for the whole season.
And they could have played 3-4-5 at the back today. It didn't matter because Man United were dreadful in all positions. I thought particularly up front they offered nothing.
United invested heavily into their midfield in the summer transfer window. Youri Tielemans came in from Aston Villa for £35 million. Andre Santos arrived from Chelsea for £48 million plus add-ons. Carrick wanted more control in the middle of the park, so he brought in midfielders who are comfortable receiving the ball under pressure and keeping possession. But just because a lot of new faces have come in, that doesn't mean the midfield is suddenly flawless now. Against Hull City, Tielemans and Santos did not look great at all. Hull City were more aggressive, more physical.
There just wasn't really anything there in terms of passion from the United performance. There wasn't any energy, there wasn't any athleticism in that display. And you can see by the stats there, you could perhaps look at the stats and think that maybe United, if you haven't watched the game, and think maybe United dominated the game and were a little bit unlucky. That just wasn't the story of the game. If anything, Hull could maybe feel a little bit hard done by that they didn't win by more goals, and United really were well beaten.
And United's midfield struggled to deal with it. Tielemans in particular looked nowhere near fully fit. He came back late after the World Cup, and after about half an hour, the poor guy already looked exhausted.
Tielemans come out of the World Cup quite early, and Cunha, I think, as well came out quite early.
Keep in mind, Tielemans, even at full fitness, isn't the most athletic person. So this isn't a problem that's just gonna go away. Give him the ball and he can control games. But when the game becomes a wrestling match, where he's constantly chasing second balls and runners, you are asking him to play the exact type of football he's least suited for. Now, Santos didn't look great either, hence why both midfielders were subbed out by the 67th minute. Now, of course, it's only been one game and these guys do have some great strengths. But dealing with physicality is vital in the Premier League, and this isn't an issue that's just gonna go away. This is exactly why United went in for Baliba, because he gives Carrick power, athleticism, ball winning, and the ability to cover massive spaces when everyone else has gone forward. Put someone like Baliba next to Tielemans, and suddenly Tielemans doesn't have to spend half the game chasing shadows. Put him next to Santos, and Santos can concentrate more on progressing the ball instead of having to become the defensive anchor.
Baliba's interesting because he's kind of more energy than the other two. The other two are going to be deeper, whereas, Manchester United needs someone that's going to offer something going forward, and that's what they didn't have sort of on the weekend, isn't it? So I think United fans will be really excited about the midfielder coming in for Brighton.
Yes, if Carrick wants his team to dominate the ball, Tielemans and Santos makes plenty of sense. But somebody still has to win the ball back first. The next issue is something that has been a problem no matter the manager for United in the past few seasons, and that's dealing with a low block. United have some dangerous attackers. Mbeumo, Cunha. I would still consider Rashford a decent attacker too. Give these guys space to run into, and United can absolutely kill teams. The problem is what happens when there's no space. Like I said, this was a concern even under Ten Hag and Amorim, and it hasn't changed. Hull City scored twice, dropped into a 5-4-1, and just invited United to try and break them down. They couldn't. They had more than 60% of the ball in the second half, but most of that possession was completely harmless. Shaw to Maguire, Maguire to Mazraoui back inside, switch it across, repeat. It was that horrible horseshoe possession that we have seen from United over 700 times in the past few seasons. It's all foreplay, no penetration. Eventually someone gets bored and launches it into the box. The problem was that there was nobody there to attack it. Šeško wasn't fit enough to start, so Hull's center backs could just sit inside their own box and head everything away. And then Dogu on the left didn't really help. He can be incredibly useful when there's space. We saw that versus Arsenal last season. He's athletic and can run all day. But asking this guy to receive the ball against a packed defense and start beating players in tiny spaces is a completely different job. His touch becomes heavy like he's wearing Timberland boots, everything slows down, and Hull were perfectly happy letting him have the ball because they knew he wasn't going to consistently create anything from those situations. Then there was Bruno. Now Bruno is a really interesting player because on one hand, this guy was the Premier League Player of the Year last year and broke the record for the most assists in a single Premier League season. But he also has some glaring weaknesses.
Have you noticed what Fernandes does though? when Man United go behind and he's not having a good game, what he does, he starts running around trying to get the crowd on side, running out of position to make everyone believe that he's working really hard for the team, but really, he's just playing for himself.
Bruno sometimes treats the ball like a bomb. He wants to go forward as fast as possible, no matter the context. Because he takes extreme risks in central areas, losing possession often leaves the midfield pivot exposed and makes it so much easier to counter United. Now yes, sometimes he will make a brilliant pass or score a beautiful goal, but there are many instances where keeping possession would have been the better decision. This has never really been Bruno's game. He naturally wants to play vertically, which can sometimes make an already chaotic match even more end-to-end. Then there's Bruno's tendency to basically go looking for the ball whenever things aren't working. Whenever United are struggling to create something, you'll see him drop beside the defensive midfielder, move into the fullback areas, or come incredibly deep just to get involved. You can understand why he does it. He wants to take responsibility and make something happen. The problem is that every time Bruno leaves his position, somebody has to fill that space. Sometimes nobody does. So instead of having Bruno between the lines where a number 10 can actually hurt the opposition, he's picking the ball up 50 yards away from goal. And when that starts happening repeatedly, United's entire attacking shape can become pretty messy.
Bruno Fernandes is a player that I've always felt you can see there's so much quality there, but when he goes missing, he really goes missing.
Bruno is just a symbol of a bigger issue that Carrick has to deal with. The squad looks more naturally suited to transition football. That's why even last season, United were able to pick up results in so many big games, but then lose to teams that they should have been beating on paper. Against a team that attacks United, Mbeumo and Cunha can be terrifying. Against a team that's sitting 30 meters from their own goal, now you need completely different qualities. You need quick combinations, players receiving between the lines, constant movement around the box. Now a healthy Šeško will be able to help with this because having a massive striker occupying the center backs will naturally create more space. United then also have a direct outlet for crosses when Shaw and Mazraoui get into crossing position. Also, having a proper striker helps the press. If United want to become a top team again, they can't just rely on opponents being stupid enough to give Mighty Mouse from UFC and Matheus Cunha 40 meters of grass to run into every weekend. Now Carrick has to figure out all of this very quickly because he no longer has the luxury of playing one match a week. When he took over, United were already out of both domestic cups and had no European football. Most weeks, Carrick had 7 full days to prepare for the next match. Some weeks he even had more. I swear there was a period in February where United didn't play for like a month. That made his job a lot easier. He could use the same starting 11 every week, keep his best players fresh, and spend the entire week preparing specifically for the next opponent. This season, that completely changes. United are back in the Champions League, which means Carrick now has to deal with midweek games, traveling around Europe, and then immediately turning around and playing in the Premier League a few days later. This is the Premier League. You can't pull a PSG gimmick and rest your best starting 11 in every domestic match so that they're fully healthy and energized for Champions League matches. If you do that, you're going to be in the relegation zone like Tottenham. So now we're going to learn a lot more about him as a manager because Carrick has shown that he can get results when he has a full week to prepare. Now he has to show that he can rotate his team without United suddenly falling apart. And there are certain positions that are definitely lacking depth. Luke Shaw, aka Jake Paul, remains United's most reliable option at left back, and you cannot expect that guy to play multiple games in a week consistently. Everybody knows his injury history. Patrick Dorgu can come in and give Shaw a rest, but there are still questions about him in that role. It's why United have been looking at another left back, with players like Lewis Hall, Miles Lewis-Skelly, and Alejandro Balde being linked. At center back, United are not necessarily lacking bodies, but there are question marks around specific players. Lisandro Martinez is fantastic, but he has struggled to stay consistently fit, which has already forced Heaven into a much bigger role. And Heaven is clearly a talented young defender, but he's still only 18. There's a massive difference between giving an 18-year-old opportunities throughout the season and then suddenly needing him to start huge Champions League games because someone else is injured. Once United start playing every 3 or 4 days, that depth is going to be tested very quickly. Then there's Benjamin Šeško. He's the only natural striker in the squad. Last season, Carrick got away with Mbeumo and Cunha as a false 9 depending on the matchup, but that's a very high risk, high reward strategy. There will be games where Cunha will ball out in that position, but there will be many games where the lack of size and physicality up front in the box will hurt United. Last year, Carrick could rely on a relatively small group of players because he only had 1 game every week. He doesn't have that luxury anymore. Another massive difference for Carrick this season is the amount of pressure he's under. When he originally came in as an interim manager, the situation was completely different. Ruben Amorim had just been sacked, and Carrick was playing with house money. If United won, Carrick got credit for turning things around. If they lost, people could just point towards the problems he inherited. Nobody was expecting him to completely fix Manchester United in a few months. That protection is now gone.
Held up as his biggest strength, the fact that he is calm and it's the antidote to what came before, and then all of a sudden now it's the biggest criticism of him that he's too calm or too composed. It's always
the way, isn't it?
Doesn't look like he's hurting enough. So yeah, I'm sure everyone will respond.
Carrick has a permanent contract until 2028. Ineos have backed him in the transfer market, and he's had an entire summer to build the team around his ideas. So now when something goes wrong, people are going to look directly at him. And we already saw that after the opening day defeat against Hull. It took one game for people to start questioning whether Carrick was actually good enough. There were arguments that his interim run was just a new manager boost, and that Hull had exposed many of the tactical problems underneath it. That's Manchester United. You can spend months building up goodwill, and then after a few games, everybody's questioning your project. He's gonna have every single decision being analyzed. We saw it with Kobbie Mainoo. Carrick decided to leave him on the bench and start Tielemans and Santos. And the moment United lost, people immediately started asking why Mainoo wasn't playing. That's what happens when you're managing a club like United. If you bench a popular academy player and win, nobody really cares. If you bench him and lose, it's the biggest talking point from the game. Then there's Marcus Rashford, and his return creates an interesting problem. He's come back from his loan spell at Barcelona as one of the biggest names in the squad, but Carrick can't completely change his system just to accommodate him. He has to figure out where Rashford fits, how many minutes he deserves, and whether he's actually making United better within the system they're trying to build. And if Rashford isn't starting regularly, Carrick is inevitably going to get questions about it. Another concern with Carrick is that some United fans feel like the success from the previous season was misleading. Obviously, the results were fantastic. United eventually finished third with 71 points, and Carrick completely changed the mood around the club. But when you look at the numbers underneath those results, some would argue that the warning signs were already there. United were conceding fewer goals than their expected goals against suggested they should have, and scored more goals than their expected goal stats showed. So for many fans, the opening day loss to Hull City confirmed their fears.
But would you accept that there was a lack of passion in the first half?
Oh, come on, that's ridiculous.
There was no, that's not what you were assessing.
When you played football,
yeah,
you understand, like, that's a ridiculous thing to say. Just because you get beat doesn't mean you don't.
United weren't really forcing mistakes. They were allowing Hull to settle on the ball and then trying to defend whatever came next. Then you look at the physical side of the game. United won less than 44% of their ground and aerial duels against Hull. That's just not good enough. You can have 60% possession, complete hundreds of passes, and look like you're controlling the game. But if the opposition keeps winning the first ball, second ball, and physical battles through the midfield, that possession doesn't really mean much. And that's exactly what happened. United had plenty of the ball without ever really making Hull uncomfortable. Then the chance creation was even more concerning. United were shooting, but they weren't creating particularly good chances. Last season, sometimes that didn't matter. Bruno would produce some ridiculous pass, Šeško would finish a chance he probably shouldn't have scored based on the stats, and United would walk away with 3 points. You can't rely on that every week. Carrick's first job was getting results and bringing some stability back to the club. He did that incredibly well. Now he has to make those results sustainable, because over 10 or 15 games, individual brilliance can hide a lot of problems, but over an entire Premier League season, those problems usually catch up with you. Now, I still think Andre Santos was a great signing. To see why he was rated so highly, you have to watch this video right here.